Hello, I've got a lovely story for you today. Do you ever have a school photograph or a family photograph? In the days of this story, cameras hadn't even been invented yet, but I've got my family photograph here. Rather a nice one, isn't it? We had 4 daughters and a dog, and we had a lovely time together. They're all grown up now, and I've got grandchildren now. So I'll just put this down and tell you the story. The story of the book of we read that together, the book of Ruth. And it happened during the time of the judges. You may have listened to the story of Gideon. He was one of the judges. They came before the kings in Israel many, many, many years ago. And Ruth was a lovely girl. But first of all, we come to a family group. We've got Naomi. Here's Naomi. And her husband Elimelech. And they had 2 boys, grown-up boys, called Mahlon and Chilion. Mahlon and Chilion. They all had beards in those days, so that's why I've given them beards. There we are. But the problem was in Jerusalem and that area in Israel, near Bethlehem where they lived, there was a famine. A famine is when there's no food and people are starving, and it's very difficult. So Elimelech and Naomi decided that they would take their boys and they would go quite a long way to the other side of the Dead Sea, which is a long journey, to the land of Moab. And there they'd heard that there was food and there was work and that they could make a home for themselves. So they knew that there was going to be a future there. So off they went. And when they got there, it was wonderful. And the 2 boys met 2 lovely girls. One was called Ruth. Here's Ruth. And one was called Orpah. And they got married. And they had a lovely family time together. But then something awful happened. It was an absolute tragedy. Because first of all, Elimelech got something wrong with him and he died. So there were the 2 boys and their wives and looking after Naomi. And it was a very sad time. But then something even worse happened, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. So they had 3 funerals. So that left Naomi, Ruth and Orpah. And Naomi knew that she couldn't make a living to look after the 3 of them. A widow lady in those days was of no value at all to anybody. She thought, well, the only thing to do, my dears, is that I'm going to have to go back to my hometown to, which was this place here. We've heard of Bethlehem at Christmas time, haven't we? But that was originally the town where Naomi had come from. And her husband, Elimelech, had had some land there. So she thought she would go back. She'd heard that things weren't quite so bad there at the time. And she said to the girls, you better go home to your parents, go back to them in Moab, and maybe they'll find husbands for you. No good looking to me for more husbands, is it? And so Orpah decided that perhaps she would go. But Ruth said, no way, you're not going all that way on your own. No way at all. And she said, I really do this. I love you, she said. I'm coming with you, whatever you say. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. And where you die, I will be buried. I'm not going to leave you. So when Naomi saw that she meant what she said, well, that's wonderful, my dear. Yes, let's set off. So they gathered together their belongings and put them on their backs. I expect you've seen refugees, have you, on the television? It was a long, sad journey. And when they got to Bethlehem, they found a little place to live, and they had to plan this. How were they going to survive? Well, the Bible said in the old books, Deuteronomy chapter 24, that if the harvest is going on, then they must allow people who hadn't got anything, the poor people and the people from foreign countries, must be allowed to come in and follow the harvesters around and pick up whatever grain they could. So Ruth said to Naomi said to Ruth, what you must do, my dear, is go out to the fields, find a good field and see if you can pick up some barley for us, and then we can collect the barley together and we can grind it, make some bread at least. So that's what Ruth did. So she went out to the fields, and in the fields there were lots of people doing harvest, and the servant girls from the farmer were all out there helping. So they were all working away, picking up the corn. And Ruth joined in behind them all, picking up as much as she could. And along came the farmer, the man who owned the field, and his name was... And Boaz looked across them and he said, who's that young woman over there? And his workers said to him, oh, that's Ruth. She's the one who's come back with Naomi from Moab. She's brilliant, she's working really hard. And Boaz liked the look of her, and he called her over and he said, my dear, don't go and work in anybody else's field. You stay with my girls, and I've told the men not to bother you. When you need a drink, go and get a drink from the table in the shelter, and we'll look after you. Don't go and work for somebody else. You can stay in my fields. And he told the men, let some extra stuff fall for her. She's done such a lot of good for Naomi. So they did. And when Ruth went home, she had a great shawl full of grain. And Naomi looked at it and she said, what? That's amazing. How did you get all that? And Ruth told her what Boaz had said. And Naomi said, wow, Boaz, he's one of our relatives. In fact, he's the one that if things were done by the law, he should actually marry you and have family with you and rescue us. I wonder. And she began to make a plan. And the plan was that, she said, tomorrow, she said, have a good wash, get your pretty clothes on, don't wear your widow's dress anymore, she said, and see where Boaz lies down to sleep at night, because he would lie down in the threshing floor up here. They would lie down to sleep in there. And she said, notice where he goes to sleep, and then when it's dark, creep back in there, lie down at his feet, and when he wakes up, cover yourself up with his cloak and just tell him who you are. And that's what happened. And in the middle of the night, Boaz woke up and said, well, who's that by my feet? And she sat up and she said, it's me, it's Ruth, the one who's been staying with Naomi. Oh, my dear girl, he said, this is a great honour you've done me. He said, I will take care of you. But he said, don't tell anybody that you've been here. He said, just let me give you a present. And he put lots more grain into her shawl. And she went home to Naomi and she said, he says he's going to fix it. He's going to talk to the people at the town gate this morning. So that morning, Boaz got the town elders together. Have him wearing, here he is. How many brushes can I paint with at once? What do you think? 4 maybe. And everybody was sitting around the town gate where they did all their discussions. And Boaz said, could you just come over here a minute? I want to talk to you about something. So they said, yes, what is it? And he said, well, you know that Naomi's come back from Moab, and she owns that field belonging to Elimelech, and I'd like to buy it. But is there anybody else who has the right to buy it? And a man can, actually, yes, I'm a closer relative than you are. I'd like that field. So Boaz said to him, well, you realise that if you have that field, you have to marry the widow. You have to marry Ruth. Oh, he said, that might rather upset my wife. He said, No, he said, you can have the field. And so what he did was he took his shoe off and gave it to Boaz, which was an old custom, which meant that Boaz from then on had the right to walk across that field and to own it. So Boaz bought the field. And not long after, he married Ruth. And it was a tremendously exciting wedding. And everybody in Bethlehem, I think, knew about it and probably would have joined in. Because Boaz was full of this here. He was full of... He was full of loyalty, loyalty to the family and loyalty to Ruth, who'd taken such great care of his relative Naomi. He was really thrilled. And so Boaz got married to Ruth. Where's Ruth got to? Here's Ruth. And before the year was out, they had a little baby boy. And you can imagine that Naomi was absolutely thrilled to bits. And everybody in town was thrilled to bits as well. And full of this word here. Full of joy. Because Naomi now had a family again. And the Bible said that she put the baby on her knee and played with him, and he grew up and everybody loved him. His name was Obed. And when Obed grew up, he had a family of his own, and his little boy was called Jesse. And Jesse became the father of a boy called David. David was his 8th son. And later on we'll hear about King David, who became a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of nobody less than Jesus. And remember, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, David's family home, and it all started back here with Ruth and Boaz. Isn't it a wonderful story? And I just thought it was such a lovely story. And of course you have to have a heart in there, don't we, somewhere? And it just showed how much God values loyalty and love. The Bible tells us that he loves each one of us very much. And he always has a plan for our future, which will lead to joy, whatever's happening at the moment. So I'll say a prayer for you now. You don't have to join in if you don't want to. So thank you so much, Lord, for this wonderful story about Ruth and how she loved Naomi so much and looked after her. Please help us to look after our old people too. And help us to remember that even if tragedy happens and bad things occur, you have a plan for us, and you will help us all through our future and bring us to the joy of a knowledge of you in the end. And I just pray that everybody watching this might know that joy themselves and get to know you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for listening.